Every morning, millions of people perform the exact same ritual. They lace up shoes advertised as the safest, softest, most technologically advanced footwear ever created. Maximum cushioning, maximum comfort, maximum protection. The commercials are beautiful. A runner lands effortlessly. The foam compresses like a cloud. Every step looks silent, weightless, perfect. The message is simple. The softer the landing, the healthier your body must be. Sounds reasonable. Until you realize evolution never once promised to make walking feel like floating. Now imagine something strange. Imagine replacing the suspension system on your car with the softest springs ever built. Every bump disappears. The ride becomes unbelievably comfortable. There's just one problem. You can barely feel the road anymore. Would driving become safer, or would your steering become less precise? Your nervous system has been asking exactly that question for millions of years. Because while you're admiring the foam beneath your feet, your brain is quietly asking something completely different. Can I still trust the information coming from the ground? Inside the soles of your feet are thousands of tiny sensory receptors called mechanoreceptors. They're remarkably sensitive. Every second they measure pressure, texture, direction, weight distribution, tiny changes in balance. Even subtle shifts in terrain, they're not passive padding detectors. They're reporters. Every single step, they send an astonishing amount of information toward the brain. The surface is stable. The ground is uneven. Shift your weight left. Repair the ankle. Relax the knee. Rotate the hip. Adjust the spine. Millions of microscopic conversations happening before you're even aware you're taking another step. Now imagine those conversations becoming just a little less clear. Not disappearing, it's becoming blurrier. The ground still exists. The signals still arrive. But some of the fine detail becomes harder to distinguish. The nervous system doesn't panic. It does what it has always done. It adapts. Tiny muscles contract a little differently. Balance strategies subtly change. Joint stiffness adjusts. Movement reorganizes itself. Nothing hurts. Nothing pops. No dramatic warning appears on your smartwatch saying, "Congratulations, your nervous system has entered compensation mode." Biology is far more subtle than that. It whispers long before it screams. Here's the irony. Modern footwear companies compete to remove every sensation from walking. Evolution spent millions of years making sure you could feel every pebble that mattered. Somewhere those two philosophies stopped agreeing. And no, this isn't an argument that everyone should throw away their running shoes and sprint barefoot across a parking lot. Please don't. Your orthopedic surgeon deserves a vacation. The point is much more interesting than internet extremes. Comfort and sensory information are not the same thing. Sometimes they work together. Sometimes they compete. The fascinating question isn't whether cushioning is good or bad. It's what your nervous system does when the quality of information changes. Elite athletes compete successfully in highly cushioned shoes. Many people with arthritis or foot pain genuinely benefit from additional cushioning. Context matters. Individual anatomy matters. Adaptation matters. Science almost never gives us villains. It gives us trade-offs. And that's exactly why this story is worth telling, because while everyone else is arguing about foam thickness, almost nobody is talking about the organ hidden inside every shoe. Not the foot, the nervous system. The foot isn't simply a shock absorber. It's one of the most sophisticated sensory organs in your entire body. Every step is less like dropping a hammer and more like collecting intelligence. Your feet are constantly spying on the world for your brain. They're tiny intelligence agencies disguised as body parts. Unfortunately, some of us have accidentally sent them into witness protection. If your shoes contain more foam than your mattress, your feet may be wondering whether anyone still reads their reports. And perhaps the biggest surprise of all is that your brain doesn't actually care how expensive your shoes were. It doesn't care about the logo, the carbon plate, the marketing slogan, or whether the salesperson called them revolutionary. It only cares about one thing: the quality of the information arriving from below. Because movement has never been built on comfort alone. It's built on communication. So here's the question that changes everything. What if your feet have been trying to talk to your brain and your shoes have been quietly turning down the volume? There was a recreational marathon runner who looked like the definition of health. He never skipped training. His nutrition was meticulous. Protein intake, tracked. Hydration, measured. Sleep, monitored by 2 different apps because apparently one wasn't anxious enough. His shoes were always the newest premium model. Maximum cushioning, maximum energy return, maximum everything. If comfort could be purchased by the ounce, he had bought it. From the outside, everything looked perfect, yet something didn't add up. His neck always felt tight, not injured, just busy. His shoulders slowly rounded forward over the years. Long meetings left him strangely exhausted. His jaw clenched during stressful days. Massage helped, stretching helped, physical therapy helped for about 3 days. Then everything quietly returned. His scans looked normal. His strength was excellent. His cardiovascular fitness was outstanding. Every specialist focused on the painful area, the neck, the shoulders, the upper back, until one sports clinician asked a question that sounded almost ridiculous. Tell me about your feet. The runner laughed. My feet don't hurt. I didn't ask if they hurt. I asked what they feel. Silence. That single question completely changed the investigation because pain and information aren't the same thing. Something can stop communicating long before it starts hurting. Think about smoke detectors. You don't notice them because they're making noise. You notice them because they stop making useful noise. The human body works in surprisingly similar ways. Your feet are not merely pieces of anatomy attached to the bottom of your legs. They're one of the busiest sensory stations in your entire nervous system. Imagine an international intelligence agency with thousands of field agents. Every agent reports different information. Road conditions, weather, traffic, unexpected obstacles, changes in direction. Now imagine headquarters suddenly losing half those reports. The world hasn't changed. The quality of the information has. That's exactly how plantar mechanoreceptors work. These specialized sensory receptors embedded throughout the sole of the foot continuously detect pressure, stretch, vibration, and contact with the ground. Every single step updates your brain's internal map of where your body exists in space. This process is called proprioception, sometimes described as your quote-unquote sixth sense. Not because it's mystical, because it's invisible. Close your eyes, touch your nose. Simple. You didn't need to watch your finger travel. Your nervous system already knew where everything was. That's proprioception at work. And your feet are some of its most active contributors during standing and walking. Now meet mission control. Your brain. Contrary to popular belief, it isn't sitting inside your skull waiting for muscles to complain. It's constantly predicting what should happen next. It gathers information from your eyes, your inner ears, your joints, your muscles, and your feet. Every source contributes another piece of the puzzle. When those signals agree, movement feels effortless. When they disagree, the nervous system begins making educated guesses. Usually those guesses are incredibly good. Sometimes they come with trade-offs. Imagine trying to navigate through a city using a GPS that updates only every few seconds. You'll still reach your destination, but your steering becomes less smooth. Tiny corrections happen more often. Nothing catastrophic, just constant adjustment. Your nervous system lives in that world every second. Now let's meet another character in this story, the pelvis. Think of it as the suspension bridge connecting your upper and lower body. Every force generated by your feet travels through it. Every movement above depends on its stability below. When the brain detects subtle uncertainty during movement, it may alter muscle activation around the hips, trunk, and lower limbs to maintain balance. This isn't failure, it's adaptation. Your body is remarkably creative. Give it a challenge and it finds another solution. Sometimes a brilliant one, sometimes an expensive one. Above the pelvis sits the diaphragm. Most people think of it as a breathing muscle. That's true. It's also an important contributor to trunk stability. Every breath influences pressure inside the abdomen. Every movement influences breathing. These systems constantly cooperate. Walking isn't separate from breathing. Breathing isn't separate from posture. They're performing the same dance. Then comes the neck. Poor neck. It often receives all the blame, yet in many movement problems, the neck behaves less like the criminal and more like the exhausted employee working overtime because every department below it is behind schedule. Forward head posture, increased muscle tension, and altered movement strategies can emerge from many different influences. Long hours at a computer, stress, vision demands, thoracic stiffness, shoulder mechanics, breathing patterns. Even lower body movement strategies may contribute in some individuals. Notice the wording, may contribute, not directly cause, because biology refuses to follow simple internet flowcharts. Current evidence does not support the claim that wearing fit cushion shoes automatically forces mouth breathing or damages the cervical spine. Human movement is far more complex than a single cause leading to a single effect. What researchers do recognize is that the body functions as a kinetic chain. Change one link and the entire system reorganizes. Sometimes the changes are beneficial, sometimes neutral, sometimes less efficient. Everything depends on the individual, the task, and the environment. That's why two runners can wear the exact same shoe and experience completely different outcomes. One performs better. Another develops discomfort. A third notices no difference at all. The shoe didn't change. The nervous systems did. And perhaps that's the most surprising realization so far. Your neck may not always be the beginning of the story. Sometimes it's simply the last translator in a conversation that started thousands of steps earlier beneath your feet. Everything we've uncovered so far is fascinating, but it's only half the story. Because most people believe movement begins with muscles. Strengthen the muscles, stretch the muscles, massage the muscles, roll the muscles, tape the muscles. Apparently, muscles are responsible for everything except paying taxes. The truth is much stranger. Your brain doesn't move muscles first. It predicts movement first. That single distinction changes almost everything we think we know about human motion. Imagine trying to catch a baseball traveling 90 miles per hour. By the time your brain consciously reacted to every movement of the ball, it would already be behind you. The nervous system can't afford to wait. It predicts. Long before you consciously decide to move, networks throughout your brain are already estimating where your body will be, where the ground will meet your foot, how much force you'll need, and what should happen next. Movement isn't reactive. It's predictive. This idea sits at the center of one of modern neuroscience's most influential frameworks, predictive processing. Your brain isn't a passive observer waiting for information. It's an active forecasting machine. Every second, it creates an internal model of reality. Then it compares that prediction with incoming sensory information. If prediction and reality match, everything feels smooth. If they don't, the brain updates the model. That's how learning happens. That's how balance improves. That's how skilled movement becomes almost effortless. Now, picture your nervous system as the world's most advanced GPS, not one that simply tells you where you are, one that constantly predicts where you'll be half a second from now. Every step provides another update. Every pressure change beneath the foot fine-tunes the map. Every tiny adjustment makes the next movement more efficient. Your feet aren't merely touching the ground. They're continuously calibrating your brain's prediction engine. Now imagine receiving blurry GPS updates. Not completely wrong, just less precise. The destination remains the same. The route becomes less elegant. Tiny steering corrections appear. Energy expenditure increases. Movement becomes a little more cautious, a little stiffer, a little less automatic. That's one reason researchers have become increasingly interested in plantar sensory feedback. Not because the feet work in isolation, but because they contribute valuable information to the brain's internal movement model. Here's the real plot twist. You're not walking with your legs. You're walking with your nervous system. Your muscles are simply carrying out instructions. That sounds almost backwards because we've spent decades treating muscles like the stars of the show. In reality, they're incredibly talented actors following an exceptionally intelligent director. The director is your brain, and directors make better decisions when they receive better information. Let's zoom out even further. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing on a sandy beach. Without looking down, your feet instantly recognize the surface. Your ankles respond. Your knees soften. Your hips adjust. Your trunk stabilizes. Your arms subtly reposition themselves, all before you consciously think, oh, this is sand. Now imagine stepping onto ice. Everything changes immediately. Your stride shortens. Your muscles stiffen. Your center of mass shifts. Your body becomes more cautious. Again, before conscious thought catches up. That's predictive control in action. Your nervous system is continuously making educated guesses based on incoming sensory data. Now, here's the part that completely reframes this conversation. The goal of the nervous system is not perfect posture. The goal is successful survival. Those are not always the same thing. If leaning your head slightly forward helps stabilize your vision during uncertain movement, the brain may choose that strategy. If increasing muscle tension improves stability, the brain may accept the extra energy cost. If changing joint stiffness reduces the risk of falling, comfort becomes a secondary concern. Survival has always outranked elegance. That's why the body is astonishingly adaptable, sometimes too adaptable. It doesn't ask, is this movement beautiful? It asks, did we stay upright? Mission accomplished. Tomorrow we'll worry about efficiency. That's both the brilliance and the frustration of human biology. Now let's clear up something incredibly important. Does this mean highly cushioned shoes are harmful? Absolutely not. Many elite runners have broken world records wearing highly cushioned shoes. Modern footwear has reduced impact loading in many situations, improved comfort for countless people, and can be an excellent option depending on the individual, the activity, and the goal. The science isn't telling us to fear cushioning. It's telling us to understand trade-offs. More cushioning may improve comfort. It may alter sensory input. Different shoe designs influence gait mechanics in different ways. Different runners adapt differently. Different nervous systems solve the same movement problem differently. Biology loves individuality. Marketing loves universal answers. Guess which one usually wins on social media? Here's a question that sounds ridiculous, but stay with me. Suppose I secretly replace the soles of your running shoes with memory foam pillows. Would your nervous system instantly become a better athlete, or would it become a very confused detective trying to figure out where the ground went? Exactly. Your brain isn't searching for maximum softness. It's searching for reliable information. Reliable doesn't necessarily mean uncomfortable. It doesn't necessarily mean barefoot. It simply means useful. That's a completely different objective. And perhaps that's the most profound lesson hidden inside every single step you take. Your body isn't a machine built from separate parts. It's a prediction network. Eyes, inner ears, feet, joints, muscles, skin. Every system contributes evidence. Your brain listens to all of them simultaneously. The clearer the conversation, the less compensation is required. The noisier the conversation, the harder the nervous system has to work. Suddenly, movement isn't about stronger muscles, it's about smarter communication. And once you understand that, you'll never look at your feet the same way again. The biggest trick modern marketing ever pulled wasn't convincing you that comfort matters. Comfort absolutely matters. The trick was convincing you that comfort is the same thing as function. Those are not identical, and biology notices the difference long before advertisements do. Walk into almost any athletic store and you'll hear familiar promises. Maximum cushioning, ultimate shock absorption, next generation foam, cloud-like comfort. None of those claims are automatically wrong. But notice what's missing. Very few advertisements ask a far more interesting question. What kind of information does your nervous system receive while wearing this shoe? Because information isn't nearly as glamorous as foam technology. Yet your brain cares far more about information than marketing slogans. Here's another assumption worth challenging. If something feels comfortable immediately, it must be better for my body. Maybe, maybe not. Think about sitting in the softest couch you've ever owned. For the first 10 minutes, it's wonderful. 3 hours later, your hips are stiff, your back feels strange, and somehow you've developed the posture of a cooked shrimp. Immediate comfort and long-term function aren't always best friends. Movement follows the same principle. Your nervous system constantly balances two competing priorities: efficiency and safety. Sometimes those goals align beautifully. Sometimes they negotiate. Sometimes they argue like siblings trapped in the backseat of a long road trip. Now let's zoom back into the feet. Hidden inside them are dozens of muscles that rarely receive the attention they deserve. Not because they're dramatic, because they're quiet. They're constantly making tiny adjustments that almost never reach your conscious awareness. They help maintain stability, adapt to uneven terrain, fine-tune balance, support efficient gait. They're less like bodybuilders and more like orchestra musicians. You only notice them when they stop playing together. Now, here's where nuance becomes incredibly important. There is no convincing evidence that wearing thick cushioned shoes directly causes chronic mouth breathing. There is also no strong evidence that cushioned shoes alone reshape your face or silently destroy your cervical spine. Human posture is influenced by an astonishing number of variables: vision, stress, sleep, breathing habits, workstation setup, previous injuries, strength, mobility, pain, even confidence. Your shoes are one variable in a remarkably complicated equation, not the entire equation. That matters because oversimplified explanations are seductive. They're easy to remember. They're easy to sell. They're usually wrong. Real biology is messier and honestly, far more interesting. The body doesn't operate through single cause fairy tales. It operates through networks. Imagine an orchestra. If one violin plays slightly out of tune, the concert doesn't collapse. The rest of the musicians compensate. The conductor adjusts. The audience barely notices. But if enough tiny compensations accumulate, the music gradually loses its elegance. Human movement works remarkably similarly. Tiny adaptations, tiny corrections, tiny compromises, repeated thousands of times. Most of them are helpful. Some become habits. A few eventually become problems. The challenge isn't avoiding every compensation. The challenge is making sure your body still has options. Adaptability is healthy. Being trapped in one movement strategy isn't. That's why movement variety consistently appears in research across rehabilitation, athletic performance, and motor learning. Walk, run, climb, balance, strength train, change terrain, change speeds. Challenge coordination. Give your nervous system new puzzles to solve. Brains love puzzles. They're considerably less enthusiastic about doing exactly the same thing forever. Which brings us to one of my favorite myths. My expensive shoes fix my movement. Congratulations. Your shoes cost $300. Your nervous system still insists on participating. It didn't receive the memo that your credit card solved biomechanics. Here's another one. My posture is bad. Perhaps. Or perhaps your posture is simply the best solution your brain has available based on the information it receives every day. Notice the difference. One story blames your body. The other tries to understand it. That shift changes everything because bodies are rarely lazy. They're adaptive. Pain isn't always evidence of damage. Stiffness isn't always evidence of weakness. And compensation isn't always evidence of failure. Sometimes compensation is proof that your nervous system is doing an extraordinary job under imperfect conditions. The real question becomes, can we provide better information? Can we improve strength? Can we improve mobility? Can we improve coordination? Can we improve balance? Can we expose the body to more varied environments? Can we occasionally let the feet experience safe, natural surfaces? Can we help the brain trust its own movement system a little more? Those questions are infinitely more useful than arguing online about whether every cushioned shoe is secretly destroying civilization. The body doesn't need ideology. It needs options. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Health isn't about choosing team barefoot or team cushion. It's about understanding what each tool does, when it's useful, and when your nervous system might benefit from something different. Because evolution never designed humans to worship equipment. It designed humans to become extraordinarily adaptable to whatever they stood on. We've spent this entire journey talking about shoes, but it was never really about shoes. It was about communication. And in the final chapter, we're going to close the loop by returning to the very first promise made by those cloud-like running shoes and answer one simple question that changes the way you'll think about every step you take. Let's return to where this story began. Early this morning, someone opened a brand new shoebox. Soft, premium, engineered. Every advertisement promised the same thing. Maximum comfort, maximum protection, maximum cushioning. It sounded like the perfect ending. But now, after everything we've explored, that promise sounds different. Not because the shoes suddenly became villains, because you've learned to ask a better question. Comfort for what? Protection from what? And perhaps most importantly, what information is my brain receiving? Imagine that same runner tomorrow morning. The shoes are still there. Nothing about them has changed, but something about the runner has. Before heading out, they spend 5 quiet minutes walking barefoot on a safe patch of grass. Not because barefoot is magical, not because social media declared war on shoes, but because they're giving their nervous system a conversation it rarely gets to have anymore. The coolness of the ground, the subtle texture beneath each toe, tiny shifts in balance, micro adjustments through the ankles, the gentle sway of the body. Nothing dramatic happens. No lightning bolt, no instant transformation. No inspirational orchestra suddenly starts playing in the background. Biology is usually less cinematic than Hollywood. Fortunately, it's much more impressive. Those few minutes simply provide fresh sensory information. The brain updates its internal map. Then the runner puts the shoes on. The run begins. Same route, same pace, same footwear, but the relationship has changed. The shoes are no longer replacing the feet. They're working with them. That's the entire point. Modern tools aren't the enemy. Misunderstanding them is. Throughout history, human beings have invented extraordinary technologies. Glasses, bicycles, computers, running shoes. Every invention expands our abilities, but no invention completely replaces biology. Technology works best when it supports evolution, not when it asks us to ignore it. That's why this conversation was never really about footwear. It was about awareness. Your feet aren't passive pieces of anatomy hanging off the ends of your legs. They're active sensory organs. Every step is a message. Every surface is a conversation. Every movement is a negotiation between prediction and reality. The clearer that conversation becomes, the less your nervous system has to guess. And when the brain guesses less, movement often becomes smoother, more confident, more efficient. Not because you become stronger overnight, because you become better informed. Remember the opening image. Those advertisements promised you clouds beneath your feet. Clouds sound wonderful, unless you're trying to navigate, because clouds hide the landscape. The nervous system doesn't dream about walking on clouds. It evolved to understand the ground, not fear it, not avoid it, understand it. That's a completely different philosophy. Modern culture often tells us to protect ourselves from every sensation. Evolution tells us to interpret sensation wisely. One philosophy removes information, the other learns from it. Which one do you think kept our ancestors alive? Here's something worth remembering the next time you buy a pair of shoes. The best shoe isn't the one with the thickest foam. It isn't the thinnest sole. It isn't the highest price tag. It isn't the loudest marketing campaign. It's the one that matches your body, your activity, your environment, and your individual needs. Sometimes that's a highly cushioned running shoe. Sometimes it's a hiking boot. Sometimes it's a court shoe. Sometimes it's simply spending a few safe minutes barefoot at home or on natural ground to remind your nervous system what the real world feels like. Context beats dogma every single time. And maybe that's the lesson hidden beneath every footprint you'll ever leave behind. Your body was never asking for perfection. It was asking for communication. Your muscles weren't asking for punishment. They were asking for better information. Your posture wasn't asking to be forced into place. It was asking for a nervous system that felt confident enough to move naturally. Health isn't built by chasing the newest trend. It's built by understanding the signals your body has been listening to for millions of years. Because movement isn't controlled by strength alone. It isn't controlled by flexibility alone. And it certainly isn't controlled by advertisements. Movement is controlled by trust. Trust between your brain, your senses, and the world beneath your feet. So tomorrow morning, before you lace up your shoes, pause for just a moment. Don't ask, are these shoes good or bad? Ask a far better question. What kind of conversation are my feet about to have with my brain? That single question may change the way you think about every step for the rest of your life. If you enjoyed this evidence-based deep dive into the hidden biology behind everyday habits, join the Biohackers Lab community and download our free Foot Intelligence Blueprint. Inside, you'll find practical foot strengthening exercises, safe barefoot progression guidelines, balance assessments, evidence-based footwear selection strategies, and simple movement tests you can perform at home to better understand your own biomechanics. Because your body doesn't move through strength alone. It moves because your brain trusts the information your feet provide. And once you understand that, every step becomes more than movement. It becomes communication.